Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Podcasts by Equiture. And today I have Steve Lessie and his son Tony with us. And then I also have Millie McConaughey and her daughter Sherry Bertram here, and we're going to talk about generational situations and influences in the 911 center. Telecommunicators are going through a transition to be recognized as the first responder and get that label under the profession. And it's been a challenge over the last 50 years to make that transition happen. And we have Millie here, who started in the early 70s in 911 and EMS and responding in the field as well as becoming a dispatcher, and her daughter Sherry, who saw her along the way and then years later came into the 911 field as well. And then we also have Steve Lessie and his son Tony here, who Steve started, I believe, in the 70s. Is that correct, Steve?
Well, I went in the military in the late 70s.
Okay, military. And so then he came into this profession, and then his son, Tony, saw him along the way. So we're going to talk about their personal journeys and stories and how the parents influenced children and how they grew and developed along the way. And some of the challenges that parents have raising children in a 911 profession continues today, that the 20, 30, 40-year-olds who are trying to be in this profession and raise children and manage that work-life balance. So there's a lot of different topics to touch on, including the personal development of each of the four of you. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you, Steve, how did you begin in this from the military, and where are you today?
Jumped around quite a bit, but in the military, I was lucky enough to get chosen to serve at the White House for my whole tour. And so it was mainly guard duty, but some ceremonial. So when I got out of the military, I had really no intentions of going into public safety, but really felt like that was what I was best trained to do. Now, I'm not sorry that I did that, but again, it wasn't like when I was 10 years old, wanted to be a police officer. So then I did become a police officer and retired from Dearborn, Michigan, and then moved into northern Michigan and got an interest in 911, and then served as a director in Huron County, and then moved over by Lansing to finish my 911 career. And then when I retired from there, got employed by APCO, and then became the director of communication services in 911. And then now I serve as a senior consultant part-time. So in a nutshell, that's it.
Very nice.
He also serves as senior consultant to me on a regular basis.
I'm still learning from Tony.
Very nice. Well, with that transition, Tony, why don't you share with us how you started your career and where you are today?
So my career into public safety was somewhat unexpected. I went to college out of high school with full intention to be a computer network engineer, an IT guy. And when I started taking the classes at Fair State University in Michigan here, I wasn't as interested in the work as I once thought I was. So in high school, when my dad was a director, I always remember popping into the dispatch center and visiting with the dispatchers, looking around at the equipment, asking Dad what this was, what that was, just because I was interested in computers. So as my college career went on and I realized that my interest really wasn't there just to sit in a back room and write code or work on networks, I thought it was a real nice balance of wasn't supposed to have that happen. I thought it was a really nice balance to work with computers and also to work with people. And as I went through my college career, I enjoyed working with people more and more. So I remembered all the things that I remember asking Dad about growing up, and it was just kind of a natural fit to say to myself, well, let's go that route, because I can still be involved in technology and I can still work with people. And it was one of those careers that I thought I could jump into and decide then if I liked it. So obviously I did. I got employed by Ione County Central Dispatch right out of college. I worked there for a couple years. That was just outside of Grand Rapids. Then I went to Kent County Sheriff's Department, where it was a little bit bigger center. Got more involved, had more exposure to more intense calls. Got to work with a lot more people, just being at a larger department, getting to do more things. And my interest grew from there. Then I took a supervisor position at the Grand Rapids Police Department, where I was able to work on projects and not necessarily be on the floor, but work in the back room and work on back end things. And through that, work on committees, and that was where my interest grew, with all the back end things that happen in a PSAC. So I did that for 5 years, and then the deputy director position at Sarisa became available. I applied, was blessed enough to be offered the position, and that allowed me to move my family. I have 2 sons and a wife, closer to our family where they are rooted, and from there it has progressed into a director role, and that's kind of where I'm at today.
Very nice. So you kind of touched upon, there's so many different avenues that you could actually take in a 911 career. And I believe coming into this business, you may not realize that as a young telecommunicator, but there really are a lot of different avenues, and whatever interests you have, for instance, in the computers in the back room that you had, Tony, you can really bring a good service to dispatchers who may not have that knowledge, and share it, because you really have to know computers now. It's not just a phone and a headset with the radio. Everything is computer based, so that has been a big change from the early years.
I think you said it well, when 911 has a lot more avenues that you can go down and still be directly involved. So when a lot of people, young telecommunicators, come in, they think, oh, I'm just sitting at a console, I am just answering phones, I'm dispatching. There's a lot more to what happens in a PSAC than just that. And I was lucky enough to have supervisors and managers all along the way that knew that's what my interest was and kept me exposed to those sort of things, and my interest grew. So I feel very blessed along the way that every place that I've worked has kept me in the loop on backroom activities, knowing that was my interest, and I think that is a big part of how I got to where I am today.
Very good. We'll talk further about that, but now I'd like to turn to Sherry and her mother, Millie. Excuse me. Millie, you started back before there were computers, and right when 911 was coming to the States. Do you want to share your journey a bit?
Well, I
how
started working on an ambulance.
Your career?
I worked on an ambulance 7 years, and when I needed a job, I thought, oh, I know everything. So I moved into the police department and started dispatching 5 different departments, 3 fire, 1 ambulance, and the police. So, yeah, we didn't have computers. We had you keyed the mic. Also, we were in touch with Oakland County Sheriff all the time. And they listened to us, we listened to them. I had to put warrants in and keep contact cards, and I even would get off duty and jump on the ambulance on a run when they didn't have anybody. So then I decided I needed something bigger and better, more challenging. So I went to work for Waterford Township police department. And I didn't have to dispatch fire, but I had umpteen officers on the road, and plus undercover guys. And I was far busier than I was in Holly, even with 5 departments. So this girl loved what I was doing. So there she is.
Did she come to the station or the dispatch center as a 10-year-old
Yes.
and see what you were doing?
Yeah, yep, she did. With brand new clothes of mine on. And of course I'm busy, but we started dispatching when I went to Waterford in a trailer. And that's all it was, a big, long trailer. And I would have a sergeant on the desk. However, if he wanted to go, he'd just jump in his car and go, leave me there. And Waterford was busy. Only one dispatcher, just me, first woman. So.
Nice. So the profession then was all hands on deck. You did whatever was needed
Yeah.
to get the job done.
Yeah.
And you had to thrive on that adrenaline.
Well, there was
And
like,
I think not everyone can be a dispatcher, and you have to have that sort of DNA to be able to do what you did as a single dispatcher with multi-agencies needing you to respond. I don't think that's changed much.
like
You
traffic.
still have to have that similar personality.
Well, there was traffic stops, B&E, all at the same time. It was horrendous. And here's my desk sergeant out wandering around. I loved it. Yep.
So then, Sherry, you come into the picture.
Oh, well, I'm
Seeing
I
how
got
much your
one
mother
more-
loved it. Why don't you?
one more thing. I moved to Florida.
Sure.
Started working in the Kissimmee Police Department as a dispatcher. They would not allow us to see any of the officers. We were not to have any contact with any of them. And it was a windowless building. It was really spooky. And they had, you probably don't know, but they had Q, period, and then you had to type everything out.
Into the state system or
Yes.
NCIC.
Yes, I hated it. I lasted, probably,
Few months.
yeah,
Yeah.
just a few months. Couldn't handle it. Yeah. But that was my last dispatching was Kissimmee, Florida.
How long
Okay,
ago
and
was
then-
that?
Pardon?
How long ago was it?
Oh, gee.
How long ago was that?
That was probably in the early 80s or mid 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was so behind what I had left in Michigan. They were just not with it. And
So as you retired, did you miss the activity?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I went to work for an apple orchard after all this excitement in my life.
Well, she worked for Disney World for 10 years.
Nice.
Yeah, I worked at Disney. When I went to get a job, I wanted security because that was my life. And they said, no, can't do that. It was almost all retired police officers were security
At Disney.
at Disney. But they hired me in merchandise. So I stayed there 10 years. Very interesting.
I know as an observer and a PSAP manager and dispatcher for many years myself, Disney always seemed to be the dream job for
That's
telecommunications
Yeah.
because of how robust their systems were, and no attention to detail was too big,
right.
that they tackled everything. So I'm sure that was a great opportunity and a lot of fun years for you.
It was. Yeah.
Nice. Well, Sherry, I'll let you jump in here whenever you think your mother has ended sharing her great career with us.
Well, so like Tony, I used to go visit my mom, when she was working, and they had that old mic. Oh gosh, it's right out of my head right now. What we used
The gooseneck mic?
The gooseneck mic, yeah. And that's what she did. They answered the phone with the like this so they could write, because there just wasn't the technology when she was in her first police department, was so different than, well, by the time I moved to Colorado in 1983, and she moved to Florida, and I got my first job in 911, but I had applied at a whole bunch of different places in Colorado because I didn't have a job, and the government had great benefits, and they were secure, and I knew public safety. I'd been working in the ambulance by then for a couple years, and so I worked in the Denver metropolitan area at Lakewood for a couple years, or 10 years, and then I went to Estes Park because that was always my goal, to live in the mountains, and I became a supervisor, and then I became the civilian manager, and so I was there for several years, and then I decided it was time to move home because my parents were still here in Michigan. So I was hired by St. Clair County Central Dispatch, and that's when I met Steve. Steve, I don't think you were on my hiring board, but I know Vic was. Do you remember if you were on my hiring board, the one on the telephone?
I don't think he heard you.
No, I'm sorry, I missed that, sure.
Oh, I had a phone interview before I came to Michigan, before I flew out, and several of the directors interviewed me. Were you on that?
I was on the panel, I believe, Sherry.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
No, isn't that a coincidence?
It is a coincidence. And
I had not really thought about how the whole circle went.
yeah, you did really well in the interview. I remember now that you were doing it from Colorado, so that does spark a memory. Yeah.
Right. I had blue jeans on that day and tennis shoes.
Right.
But I was pretty relaxed. But we didn't have anything like what we've got now. We didn't have Zoom, it was just the old-fashioned phone. Technology has changed so much in 15 years. So Steve was on my first hiring panel to come back to Michigan, and then I stayed in St. Clair County for 4 years, and then I went to Sarisa, and that's where I retired for family reasons. But before I left, I hired Steve's son. So that's why I think that's so cool that he was on my hiring panel, and for a few months, my mom and I were both dispatching. She was in Florida and I was in Colorado, and we would compare. And technology in states are very, very different, even now. But back then, I think it was probably more so.
So yes, our audience can see that Sherry, you worked with Steve, and then Steve's son Tony, you hired him, and now Sherry, in your semi-retirement, Tony's taken over the agency that you ended your career in, I believe. If I'm following you all.
That's correct.
Okay. That is a very nice legacy to see how things are moving forward. Tony, you said that you have two sons. Do you think they are seeing the same interest in your work that
Well, my
we
oldest
just
son was
discussed?
eating Legos last night, so I
Okay.
don't know that he's interested in working just yet. He's 5. And
So
then
he's your oldest.
He's my oldest, and then I have a 3-year-old. So it was
Well-
funny last night. I was reviewing his kindergarten homework, and he got really high remarks. So I said, "Case, you are doing really good in school. You're so smart." And his reply back to me was, "I really like chewing on these Legos." So
Nice.
he's not quite ready for the working world just yet, but yeah.
Well,
I
it'll
look forward
be
to the day that he peaks in interest.
interesting to see in 15 years where he might end up in his course.
Yeah.
Hopefully not where he is today.
Yeah.
Doing Legos.
So, in raising your children, I know it's challenging to make that work-life balance happen. Can you share a time where you had to be at work and you also had the pull to be home and take care of things there? And what type of advice or experience can you share for our viewers as to how to make that happen and how to stay perhaps calm in your demeanor and still handle both situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been able to be both sides just through my son's life so far. So when my oldest son was born, I just got done working a night shift at Grand Rapids at the time, and that shift ended at 6 a.m. And on my way home, my wife went into labor. So I went right to the hospital, which was really just a couple blocks away, which was nice, but as you know, labor takes a long time. So this Case, my oldest son, was born many hours later. So I was pure exhaustion, but running on adrenaline of my firstborn coming into the world. But I don't even know how to really respond as far as advice to give others. It's just something that you just kind of pick yourself up and do. And maybe the adrenaline is what really gets us through the things that we need to do. So I'm running on no sleep, and I can't complain about this to my wife because she's literally giving birth, right? So I just have to just kind of do what I need to do and get through. And I think that holds true when you're in the job. You have the downtime, but then things speed up and you take a hot call and the adrenaline gets you through. And I think that's just kind of the nature of people that are in 911, is just to power through when you need to. Now my work and home life is in a completely different balance set, where I'm in a Monday through Friday role. I'm there for dinners, I'm there on the weekends, but what's different now is that I'm always paying attention to my phone and what's coming across, and I'm finding myself, yes, I'm home, but I'm distracted more than I should be for my family. Whereas before, when I was dispatcher, I could leave work and then I could just be at home and focus on home. So the quality of life has shifted, but I haven't really determined if it's for better or for not, just because of it's nice to be home but undistracted. But it's also nice to be home for the big time events, the dinners, the weekends, the holidays. So it's just something that we power through. It's something that I know that I need to work on to focus more on family when I'm at home. And you need to be attentive to work in the background, but making sure that the home life comes first. Because if the home life comes first, I'm a happier person, and when I come to work, that resonates, I believe, to employees.
That's a very good point, Tony. I think shift your work-life home balance shifts depending on the type of work you're doing. As you're a dispatcher working shift, you can leave at 6 in the morning and not worry about what's happening in the telecommunications center. But as you become a manager or someone working days, Monday through Friday, when you're home, you're just paying attention to your phone now, and you're a little bit divided. So I guess work is rarely perfect, and you have to figure out what works in your own life. So, Steve, in your experience, you were in the military and then a police officer, and during those years, do you have more than Tony
summed it up
as
fairly
your
well.
son?
I think what you give up when you move
Okay.
from dispatching to administration is, as a first responder or a dispatcher, and if you're working a shift, you don't have an inbox, and you don't even know what an inbox is. But when you're an administrator, you do, and things never leave your inbox. If you don't take care of them, they just start to pile up. So, I did miss those days when your shift ended and you went home and you never thought about work. And technology, improvements have affected you off work too, because before we were so connected, you could leave work at work. And now, like Tony says, you're always kind of distracted slightly by paying attention to what's going on at your center, and you have to do that. There's no way you can get around that. You talk a little bit about what folks that are in the industry now can do to help alleviate that. I would say, eat healthy, stay healthy, exercise, to kind of help work with your body when it does shift work. It's tough out, right? And so you got to really do everything you can to help get around that. Now, technology and progress hasn't changed the fact that public safety does shift work, and that's not going to change. That's going to stay the same. So we're going to have to just kind of work at that on our own the best way we can.
Yeah, I like the way you put that, to keep your personal physical health and mental health in good working order, because as a dispatcher, that's your tool. If you're not in a good headspace, you can't do your job. And as administrators, you know that when your employees come in and something's happening to affect their mental capacity and or they're physically tired, that has a direct impact on your first responders and how you are able to answer 911 calls and handle that person's crisis. If you're in crisis yourself, it's difficult to take care of others. So a whole nother topic would be the mental health crisis and the mental continuum that telecommunicators have. And perhaps we'll save that for another podcast here with Equicture. So, Sherry and Millie, care to share your experiences on keeping your children, raising them and keeping them in check and through school while you're working in the field?
Well,
Millie, I'm sure that was a challenge, especially being on the ambulance.
yes. When they were younger, not babies, I worked backup for the ambulance. So when that first rig went out, didn't matter all night. I had to get up, get dressed, and go down to the ambulance building. So there would be another ambulance there. The kids usually slept through it. They were older. I think one of the hard times I had was Sherry's brother had an automobile accident, and somebody brought him to the police department where I was dispatching, and he was hurt. And she was on the ambulance, and I'm dispatching. It was really emotional. And I stayed there and answered the calls. Sherry comes over, they take care of him, and it was a trifactor, you might say, to have her on the ambulance, my son sitting there, and me dispatching. But the place I dispatched in Holly was a little old log cabin. That's all we had, little log cabin. And they had a little jail in there where a prisoner could have crawled right over the top. It was, yeah, is really backward to what you people do now. Way backward. But I think they grew.
Well, that's an amazing story.
Huh?
That's an amazing story. And you know, the person
I
that
said, that's an amazing story.
the person that brought my brother in was our uncle.
And he didn't even know it. He was in shock. And my aunt and uncle brought him to the police department. That was, woo! Yeah, anyway, I think
A lot of strong memories there.
I think she liked the ambulance, and I had a feeling she was going to dispatch because she just liked hearing my stories of dispatching and what they did, and she also liked me working on an ambulance. And as soon as she was old enough, she started working on an ambulance. So, yeah, she followed in my footsteps, except she kept going. I kind of died out. Anyway.
Well, I think things have changed as the decades have gone by.
Oh, my.
Sherry, care to share some of your stories with raising your children and keeping that balance going?
Oh, well, so I obviously didn't have children when I started. Tony's story of the birth of his son makes me laugh because I worked, in the dispatch center and until they put me on disability. And disability back then was way different than it is now. But the kids' dad, he would work in the afternoons and I would work days or vice versa, and we would literally meet in the driveway and hand off the baby. Hey, well, the baby's done her thing today. And but then as they got older and I moved up to Estes Park, I had it was a lot smaller, but I had more freedom, and I would frequently get calls from the middle school principal. Hi, Sherry, this is, I'm going to not say her name, and I'd say, which one? Because we had 4. And it was usually the youngest, who's now a gunnery sergeant in the Marines. And she called once and said, Matthew just ran into a flagpole or was pushed playing football. And I said, okay, I'll be right there. And I dispatched the ambulance, handed it over to another person, beat the ambulance there to the school. And that was funny. They all jump out of their rig, and they all knew me. It was a small town, and they were so intent on going to take care of my son that they forgot to put the ambulance in park. Estes Park is a mountainous community, and the ambulance is rolling down the hill, and it was funny. You balance, but then we grew those kids up, and now we're raising 2 more, a 13-year-old and almost 11, and it was the 2 youngest that we're raising that made my decision to walk away from the PSAP. And as Tony knows, that was an extremely hard decision for me. He watched me every time I came into work struggle with that, but in the end, I left the PSAP world because of my kids, because of my family. And I would do it again, even though once in a while I'll hear from Tony and he'll tell me something, I'll be like, oh, I want to be there so bad. But it's a balance, and I spent a lot of years out of balance looking at my phone when I was home, and it's nice to be more in balance. But being a director had a lot of perks. You really had the opportunity to really make a difference and help people. And now I'm not just talking about the citizens, I'm talking about help people with their personal growth in their career. And I loved that. That was my favorite thing.
So as a director, I think something that's fulfilling is being able to watch someone that you've hired grow into their own and grow into a different aspect of telecommunications. There's training, there's computer work, there's technology, there's being outreach through your county or state, and then going on nationally. Sherry, I know you and Steve worked with APCO together, I believe. Would you like to speak to that and the experience and what you found fulfilling there?
Steve and I worked for the with the Michigan Communication Directors Association. We were both on the executive board at the same time. And again, it was all that MCDA is all of the directors in the state of Michigan. And it's just, an opportunity to be one voice, and, you bounce your ideas off people, and everyone's having a similar experiences. You've seen one PSAP, what did Steve say earlier? You've seen one PSAP, you've seen one PSAP, but people still experience the same challenges, and what do I do? And it was the MCDA that I went to right after I came to Michigan. My second day on the job, I had to terminate somebody. And I went to that group of people and I said, why? And they were so supportive. And this is why you're here. You're here to make a difference. And I really enjoyed that time on that committee. And when I was working on it with Steve, we just had fun.
And I can add to that, MCDA was a real help. I remember getting my start similar to Sherry, and it was, one of your go-to places to get help from other folks that were in similar situations or had past experience that could help you through. And then, moving on to APCO, it was more of the same sort of work, but on a national level. We do a lot of consultation work for reviews of different operational reviews or technical reviews for PSAPs all around the country. So that exposed me to, all of the states almost. And so I've had a really great time at APCO. I thought it was a great way to sort of finalize a career. And what I really most enjoy about APCO is now I'm in kind of a technical role where I'm working with the carriers, with ADIS, and talking about issues like location accuracy and interoperability and things of that sort. So it's, I believe, having a big impact nationally and trying to make the industry a little better in the way that they design equipment, if you will, for PSAPs and for people that are calling 911. So far as handsets and things like that. So it's been very well rounded, and I'm very grateful to be able to do it.
So you mentioned that you're working in the technology end of things now. It's interesting that you, being at the end of your career, are able to push for better technology, and Tony being kind of in the middle of his career, knowing that. We also have young people who don't know anything different from this technology coming out of college or high school and becoming into the workforce. What do you see as the biggest technology challenges for a PSAP today and perhaps the next 3 to 5 years moving forward? Tony, maybe you could speak to that, since you're the current operational director having to navigate through all of these different things.
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is it's ever evolving. And my career is obviously the shortest out of this, but all throughout dispatching, every year I can think back and think of an improvement or a change that was made from when I started dispatching in 2006. It seemed every single year something changed, and it wasn't just a minor change. Getting used to a new CAD even, and new provisions and new capabilities that a new CAD system had, wasn't just something that you could just sit down at and understand right away. New phone systems, the ability to text. I mean, all those things were ever evolving. I think the biggest challenge for a new telecommunicator, as with me, is just staying on top of what's up and coming and how it can help our citizens and responders, and learning ways to implement it and train it and to use it to its full capability. It's a challenge just to know that it's not a stagnant industry, that things are ever evolving, and it makes the job more complicated, and it makes it difficult to train new people to sit down and train all these new capabilities within a PSAP versus just the expectation of a new hire coming in and saying, oh, I'm going to be answering phones, I'm going to be sending EMS, fire, and police to them. There is so much more that a PSAP is capable of, and understanding all those capabilities and being able to fulfill them is very challenging and stressful for, I think, the dispatcher today.
Very well put, that it's not a stagnant industry. Sherry, anything to add to that you've seen?
Oh, well, I came, from paper and pen and a conveyor belt to computers and, watching the technology that's available now. Having a 911 call come into your center and the cameras in that area automatically feed into the dispatch center. I mean, really cool stuff. We didn't have it, but I know it's out there. There's so many things that have changed, and as a dispatcher, it's great to be aware of them, especially if you want to make this field your career, because you need to be able to be ready to move if you're in any kind of a position of authority. And then, as a director, you got to stay on the cutting edge. You might not have to have your center move early in a new technology piece, but to be aware of it and how it's working and for others, so that you can monitor it, so you can move your PSAP when you're ready. That's important. And Tony said it really well. It's a challenge at every level.
I would agree with everything you all have said, and I think you've put it together in a great fashion to share with our audience and young people. I think having this telecommunicator career, either as a career or a stepping stone, is invaluable for public safety. I know I've worked with dispatchers who went on to become paramedics, or dispatchers who went on to become police officers or detectives, or even most recently a dispatcher who worked for me part-time is now a fire chief, and or another one became a doctor. So I believe that being a telecommunicator teaches you all sorts of life lessons and ways to handle emergency situations and stay calm and multitask, and that's not an easy thing to do, and this job is not for everyone. So I believe those who work in the field now are blessed and have someone watching over them to make sure that they get through day to day to day. Aside from family support and being able to rely upon your family to help you navigate through these tragic situations and stressful situations, I think peer-to-peer support is also important. So the culture in your communication center is something that you have to work towards improving and building those personal relationships as well. any last thoughts from all of you, and we can go around circle on that importance and how you may have been co-workers at one point and then
Yeah,
maintained
that's a good example.
lifelong friendships
Um,
as well.
When I was young and in my 20s and just starting out as a police officer in Metro Detroit, you're exposed to a lot of things that you had never been exposed to before. And one example that I use a lot is, as a police officer, you would get personally threatened by someone that you had arrested. Either they would threaten you or threaten your family personally, and that is really something for me that was hard to deal with, as with lots of other people too. And I still remember an older corporal that worked the back desk, and you might show your anger toward that threat, and he would calm you down, and he would explain to you that's part of the job, and that you're not going to change the world. Because as a young person in public safety, you really do want to change the world. That's what you're there for. And so I think that his calming advice really worked out well for me. And then my other example I wanted to point out. So you talked about being a dispatcher and then moving into different roles. I have an example of being a first responder for over a decade and then becoming a 911 director in a small agency, and had to fill the role of dispatcher because of the scheduling issue. So I think this is going to be not that hard to do. I've been first responder for over a decade. How tough can it be? Well, let me tell you, I got pretty worked up on a call where a lady had called in and someone was breaking through her door. Now, it turned out to be domestic, but let me tell you, I experienced something that I really hadn't thought much about, because I'm a first responder, always being dispatched by a nice, calm voice on the radio. Now I've got a headset on, and I've got a lady screaming in my ear. She panicked me so bad that I forgot to send backup to the officer that I dispatched. So it gave me a newfound respect for what dispatchers and call takers and telecommunicators deal with on a daily basis. So it was a real eye-opener for me, and I think any good director really respects and admires what their staff accomplish. So that's my take on it.
Thanks for sharing that. Sherry, anything
Any
that you can think of?
Well, so you mentioned the peer-to-peer support, and topic near and dear to my heart. When my mom started, they were like, "What's wrong with you?" They just there was no real acknowledgement that what we might be hearing on the phone, the screaming, the vivid recall of a scene. There was no thought put into that as to how dispatchers were going to be reacting, and some of them were very young when they started. I was just barely 20 when I started dispatching. I wasn't equipped to deal with those kind of calls, and just how that has shifted over the years, and the peer-to-peer support programs that are out there now for PSAPs to embrace. I'm really happy to see that change.
I think Sherry is great in that area. I've worked this will be my 5th PSAP, and when I came here, it was very clear that Sherry's vision right off the bat is that dispatchers need more support than even just management. To recognize the pressures that they go through. Who better than somebody that sits next to them every day? Sherry set up a program here at Sarisa that really gives an avenue for people to reach out for help if they need it. Again, with the youngest career and here, this is probably the first place that I've ever worked that really put a focus on that. I think the 911 world in general, just from my relatively short experience, has a lot of catching up to do there, and realizing that just having an avenue, a place for that pressure to vent, really can go a long way. And we've circled back to this a couple of times in these questions, that a happy, healthy lifestyle is really, really important. And that peer-to-peer support system, or even just a support system, having that avenue is so vital to making this a profession that lasts longer than just a couple of years.
Yeah, I think recognizing those who are very capable of doing this job and flourishing in it is important, and then also recognizing it's not cut out for everyone. And if someone is coming to work and they're miserable, perhaps the CTO or a lead or a supervisor or a director take that person aside and say, maybe this isn't the job for you. Maybe this isn't the career that you're cut out for. That you gave it a great try, but perhaps moving on would be best for your personal life and your family and your financial stability, and help them move on to something different. Because it is definitely a stressful career. And now, in the future, what we're going to have to teach our telecommunicators is to see the video coming in of what's happening in the field. And I know there's a lot of discussion going on amongst our industry as to veteran dispatchers didn't sign up to see what's happening in the field, whereas a police officer knows that they're going to see that sort of trauma and exposure to horrific things that they see. But as first responders, we're going to have to, as an industry, figure out how to get that kind of balance so that the technology that young people expect to send a photo when they call 911, that we're able to process that. And I see that as additionally one of our next challenges. So, as we round out our hour here, are there any final thoughts of things that you would like to share that I haven't touched upon or brought out in you? I appreciate the great careers and professionalism that all four of you have with 911 and pushing us forward in that industry and keeping things going. So,
I just want to say thanks to my dad, and thanks to Sherry, and I guess I have quite a bit of thanks to give Millie as well.
Thank you.
I think everybody on this podcast has led me to where I am today. I've been given guidance in so many ways, directly, mostly from Sherry and my dad, but very indirectly from Millie there. So this is a nice discussion, and I'm here till 9 o'clock tonight.
I'm going to follow that up with
that's going to give me some good motivation to push me through to make it through a long time. So thank you, everyone.
I was on shift work, like I had talked about earlier, and you know what? They were good kids. Couldn't have done it without good kids, and I also, want to thank Sherry for, giving Tony an opportunity, and I want to, again, thank Tony for, sort of following footsteps, because, we'll always have a lot in common, much more than, just any normal father-son relationship. So I appreciate it, because we can talk shop, and it's a lot of fun. So, and for your audience, keep plugging away. I know that when I started out, I put myself through college, so I don't know what a college loan is or college debt. It's a great opportunity to be able to do that too. And again, it might seem like in the center there's no room for opportunity or advancement, but I think we gave in this hour some examples of things that you can delve into, like a training officer or I actually got my start by programming handheld radios on a laptop, which, was just a small thing to do, but it was something different. There's lots of things you can do. QA, it's endless. So just keep your eyes open for those opportunities and know that a lot of folks respect and admire what you do.
I guess I'll just
Millie, anything
Oh,
closing?
go ahead, Mom.
Well, I had absolutely no training, none. We just sat down and started dispatching. But I will say, when I went to Waterford, when my shift was over, many of the officers let me ride with them. And that told me what they were going through. It was very an eye-opener to know when they got a call, and I'm sitting there with them. That was neat. I don't know if they do that anymore, but that was the training I had. That's all I had. Do they do that anymore?
Yeah, you were an innovator there.
Do they do that anymore?
Yes, they do. I think most agencies. Yes, most agencies do ride-alongs, and you as an innovator, doing it at the beginning of your career, it still carries through today as a valuable tool.
Yes, good training.
Well, so my last plug is
Sherry, I'll let you.
succession planning is an important factor in any dispatch center. Your supervisors identify the line level dispatchers who are going to be leaders, and they work with them, and just all the way up. But truly, and Tony, in my case, succession planning started as in our childhood. Watching our parents, and there's no better gift.
Very nice. Well, I appreciate the time that both families have taken to be with us today, and we wish you continued health, happiness, and success in your future.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.